Howdy folks, today we will be discussing my favorite rifle that I own. This is a Marlin Camp 9 Carbine in 9mm Luger. The reason this is my particular favorite is just its dead simplicity. So, it's not exactly a well-known rifle. It was made by Marlin from the 1980s to the 1990s. It was discontinued. And it's kind of an oddball because Marlin isn't really well known for their semi-autos outside the .22 market. They're more known for their lever actions, and in this case, it's actually a very well-built gun. Most of the time we think of Marlins as fairly cheap outside of their lever actions, like the Marlin Model 60 or the Papusa, and in this case, the reason it was discontinued is because it was just too expensive. Some of the features on this, it's a birch stock, I believe, cold hammer forged barrel, if I remember correctly, and it's a solid milled receiver. So in this case, this receiver was actually milled out of a solid block of steel, and that contributed to a very high cost of production. And a lot of people I've talked to, while this rifle isn't extremely well known in the community, it is almost a cult firearm. There is a dedicated fan base to these who say Ruger should bring them back today with modern manufacturing techniques as a more traditional companion to their Ruger Camp Carbine series, or their Ruger PC series, I should say. So, a few things about this rifle. This one is towards the later end of the production. You can tell by the checkering on the wrist of the stock and on the forend. It weighs about 6.5 pounds. Yeah. And just for comparison's sake, the M1 Garand. Let's see here. Yeah, the M1 Garand weighs about 9.5 pounds. So for about 3 pounds more, you get a full-size M1 Garand battle rifle. So this, only being a little bit less in weight than a M1 Garand, that's not really out of the question. This, from what I've read, really was meant to be a modern construction M1 carbine. For those that don't know, the M1 carbine used to be the go-to camp gun, something that you could just pick off a deer or some small game for when you're on a hunting trip, and .30 carbine works exceedingly well for that. But as time went on, M1 carbines became harder to find, more expensive, more prized. Marlin entered this into the market, and one of the things that makes this thing weigh so damn much is, again, that milled receiver. So it's extremely overbuilt for being a 9mm blowback. I can tell you a few things about this after firing it for more than a year, owning it for more than a year, and that is, first, that it's extremely accurate. I can get maybe quarter-sized holes out of it at 100 yards with the right ammo. With plinking ammo, it's usually about the size of a golf ball, maybe a bit bigger. But again, with 9mm at 100 yards, that's not exactly a bad target group. Some of the other bad things about this. The lower receiver and trigger guard is plastic, and there are a lot of people online who have tried in the past to make metal trigger guards and receivers for it, and legally you can't do that because being this is a lower in the same sense an AR-15 lower is, you would legally have to file with the ATF and get permission to make a new receiver for the bottom of this. So basically you're stuck using this plastic lower receiver until it gets too brittle and breaks. So this, unfortunately, as much as I love this rifle, is very much a finite lifetime firearm because that plastic will eventually become brittle or sun-baked. So you've got that, you've got the fact that it runs on a direct blowback system, and there are two issues with the direct blowback system. The primary one is the buffer. A lot of people don't realize when they first buy this that there is a plastic buffer that has aged horribly in the receiver. They'll go to fire it and it'll turn to dust. And they won't pay attention or notice it. They will shoot it again and again and again, and Next thing you know, you've either got warping of the receiver or cracks in the stock because you're just pounding it all to hell with this solid bolt block. So what else is there? What other issues? Oh yeah, the fact that because it's a direct blowback system, the extractor on this, it's not the strongest. If it's not an issue typically when it comes to extraction, if you have a clean gun and it manages to lip over the cartridge correctly. The issue comes when you've shot about 100 rounds of dirty bulk ammo, which good luck doing that during the pandemic and during this time of hard scarcity ammo. But yeah, what happens is you'll get a dirty chamber. Because it's direct blowback, your primary extraction is not only achieved by the extractor on the bolt, it is also aided by gases coming from the chamber and barrel. So if you are at the range with a magazine, load it up with a dirty chamber, fire half a magazine, and then try to unload it, I've noticed after about 50 rounds, you'll start getting cartridges stuck in the chamber because that extractor isn't your only primary extraction means. So you'll have to drop a cleaning rod down the barrel to get that live cartridge discharged or get it out of the barrel. So other than that, realistically, I just love this rifle. It feels great in the hands. It's small, it's compact, it's comfortable to use, and while it weighs a bit, I mean, honestly, this is probably one of my favorite guns just because it's an all-arounder. You can use it for pretty much anything. I use it for coyotes regularly. And as a bonus, it also takes pretty much any standard magazine based off of the Browning High Power. So, let's see, Beretta 92F, Smith & Wesson Series 59s, Browning High Powers. There's a whole long heritage of pistols with magazines based off the Browning High Power that you can use with minimal modification. I actually own a couple of Beretta 92Fs magazines that I left in my room, in my safe, that I've taken a Dremel to, and all you have to do is cut out a small recess on the opposite side of the FS's to allow the magazine latch to interact with it. So, overall, the only other downside I can think of when it comes to this rifle is the cost. Given this rifle has been out of production for close to 20 years, if not almost 30, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. The average that I've seen across the internet is about $800 to $900, and I paid $850, almost $1,000 after the taxes and transfer fees. But even then, it's been worth it to me just because it's such a fun rifle, and this thing was mint when I got it. Even without cleaning, I pulled the bolt back, locked it open, shone a flashlight onto the bolt face, you look down the barrel, and it was a mirror. So, yeah, I absolutely think this is worth a purchase if you come across them. I think they're fantastic quality. They are overbuilt to hell, but that's a good thing because, as I stated before, this thing is pretty much going to be a finite lifespan weapon just due to the fact that the lower receiver is built out of plastic instead of metal. And I get that was kind of a cost and a weight-saving issue for Marlin, but kind of makes it a challenge for the guys who like to preserve these weapons for future generations or just like to use them. Because if you're out in an arid, dry climate like I am, this thing has a very limited lifespan if you leave it out in the sun too long. Other than that, I mean, you can do your traditional scope mounting up here, put a couple of weaver rails on it. I actually used to have a Hawk 3x9x50 power scope on this thing, which was ridiculous looking on this, like huge. And I felt it was a little overpowered, so instead I got some cheap little Chinesium red dot that I can use within 50 yards. And if it breaks or if it starts sapping battery power, I didn't mourn it because it was $50. And the iron sights on this are actually pretty good because you got that nice fluorescent bright orange front sight and a traditional pair of buckhorns. So in short, Would I recommend this rifle? Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the best guns you can get for that price that isn't like a craft-made firearm or one of the upper echelons of construction and quality control. Just make sure that you actually do have one that's in good condition. Check the buffer, check the stock, see how muddy the bore is. In this case, when I got this, the only thing that was wrong with it in terms of the bore was someone had sprayed ballast all down it, so it looked dirty and murky. But again, with that, it was just pushing a brush through and then a patch, and it was completely mirrored. So yeah, go ahead and pick one up if you can find them. Make sure you just check what you need to, make sure it's in decent condition, and treat it well because it will last you a lifetime. Not so much sure about anyone else, but also may want to make sure that you have screws, even if you don't mount weaver rails on this, that will fit in these tap holes, so that way you can actually ensure that dirt, grime, dust doesn't get into your action, because over time they will leak in through those holes. So with that, thank you for watching. I appreciate your time and patience with me, and hopefully I'll get you out another video next month.